With great confidence comes great responsibility too. You do not stop working on projects. You do not stop developing your portfolio, and you do not stop diversifying your portfolio. And I find it, tomorrow, I may not be in this boot camp this year, but I will find a way to go through this boot camp and graduate from it. And that moves some souls. And when you start to feel like you need to make some life changes.
Hey YouTube, it's the test lead, and today you're watching the full Vernon Scott interview. In it, he discusses his software QA testing experiences and journey. We also provide tips to help you on your journey. If you'd like to be featured and share your QA software testing journey, please email me at thetestinglead@gmail.com. Now back to the video. All right, so first off, I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to do this interview and share your QA experiences and your bootcamp experiences. But to start them out, can you tell them your name and where you're located at, please?
Sure. My name is Vernon Scott. I'm located in Detroit, Michigan, and I was born and raised here.
So before you joined the QA field, what was your background career-wise?
Before QA, I had a background in retail sales. I started off working at GameStop in the early 2000s because I love video games. It transferred to selling hats because I had a ridiculous hat collection. Just working at retail shops that reflected the interest that I had at that point in time. It started to get a little more professional when cell phones started to get way more popular, like in the late 2010s. I switched over to working at AT&T, and that was my last retail job. So I was fixing the software on phones, troubleshooting a lot of issues for people. And I ended up coming across a gentleman, and I ended up fixing his phone. He had a small minor issue, but it was a brand new phone. It was like the brand new iPhone. It had to be like the iPhone 10, the iPhone X at the time. I fixed it way too fast, and he was like, "Wait, what just happened?" And I explained it to him, and he was like, "If you can fix it that fast and explain it that fast, that means you have mastered this. What are you still doing there?" And I was like, "It's a job. It pays good. Selling cell phones back in 2014 wasn't a bad job. Like I was making over 50K, easy over 50K. So I just told him that I got comfortable, fixing the phones. And he asked me, what did I really want to do? And I was like, well, I would love to learn how to, make apps for phones. And he told me about a boot camp that happens in downtown Detroit. It's located in downtown Detroit called Grand Circus. And at Grand Circus, you learn how to code. I just so happened to apply to that boot camp, and not only apply to the boot camp, I applied for a development scholarship, which was a tuition reimbursement of the boot camp. They gave it away to two people, one in Detroit, Michigan, and one in Grand Rapids, because they have another boot camp in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And it was in honor of their 50th boot camp. And I ended up getting that scholarship. So all of the stars aligned perfectly at one time, and I was able to take the boot camp, and that was about 6 years ago now.
So let's slow it down.
Yeah. We can break it down. We can break it down.
Okay. So you did cell phone sales, did retail jobs, and then you met this mystery guy one day, and then you fixed his phone, which was a blessing in disguise. Because I think you need to pivot out of sales and into something else now. And then he mentioned the boot camp. But how did you first find the boot camp?
He mentioned the boot camp to me. I didn't know anything about it. He heard about it through one of his colleagues at work. And he said that his nephew took it, or some relative. He was like, it's a pretty good boot camp. 6 years ago, boot camps were the new emerging thing. So it wasn't a lot of information out there for it. But luckily, since it was in downtown Detroit, I decided to go visit myself and talk to him and go through they had info sessions. Mm-hmm. So I looked them up. They had a website. They talked about how you can learn how to code in 3 months. My parents were military vets. So when I see the word boot camp and I see a short amount of time and I'm like, oh no, that is really like an actual boot camp. So I'm like, this might be something I can do. It's super quick. I don't have a degree. That's one thing that I do want to point out. I have no degree of any nature right now. I only have the boot camp right now under my belt and one certification. But no degree. I didn't want to go back to school in the middle of retail. For anybody that has ever worked retail, you know that you work crazy hectic hours. Your schedule from one week to the next is never the same. So school is kind of out of the question at that point in time because you're sacrificing yourself to try to make optimal sales. So you got to be available, to make those. So I was like, this is a good alternative to school to not do 2 years in this. And it also gave me a glimpse into it. Like, okay, I can spend 3 months of my life on this. And if I don't like it, or if I don't succeed, I didn't waste a lot of time. Being older at that point in time, I was 29 when I found out all about this. Time was starting to become of the essence, right up against 30.
Yeah.
You're like, whatever I'm doing, this is probably what I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life. You start to feel like you need to make some life changes. So I was like, if time is of the essence, I can try this. And I know I was going to make it work, but I was like, if it doesn't succeed on a practical level, I can go right back to sales and nothing changes.
So the thing is with boot camps and schooling in general, where you have to make a time commitment and financial commitment. And with boot camps is a lot shorter, with school is a lot longer, but it's sacrificing money and working hours in retail. So what's your final thoughts before saying, okay, I'm gonna take my time and dedicate it towards this boot camp?
I would have to say when I received that scholarship, because before I got the scholarship, I applied to the boot camp and I got accepted. At that point in time, boot camps were probably at their cheapest because they were still in the experimental phase, but they still weren't cheap. That boot camp still ran about 10 grand. I would say 10 grand, 11 grand. And that's a lot of money, especially growing up in Detroit. I'm like, I don't have 10 grand and I'm not about to go pick out a loan for 10 grand because then that means I could have went back to school. So the cost averaging out, I had that doubt. I'm like, dude, I can't 10 grand over 3 months or 10 grand over 2 years for an associate's degree.
Yeah.
Not even 10 grand over 2 years for an associate's degree. I really had to choose between. So getting the scholarship, going through the interview for the scholarship, I really sold myself. And it wasn't even really selling myself. I was telling the truth. They asked one question at the end of the interview, and they asked, if you do not get this scholarship, how will you still, how will you do with the boot camp? Would you still take this boot camp? And I told him, and I meant it from the bottom of my heart, I was like, if I do not get this scholarship, I would still find a way to take this boot camp. Because at that point, I had to lay everything on the line. Like that $10,000 from them was integral, was important. I needed it. But even if I didn't get it from them, at some point I'm like, this is an opportunity. This is a shot. And I've been riding with it. So I'm going to put everything on the line. And I told him, I was like, some way, somehow, I'm going to find a way to take this boot camp. I may not get the $10,000. I may not get it from you guys. I may not get the scholarship. I may not find it, tomorrow. I may not be in this boot camp this year, but I will find a way to go through this boot camp and graduate from it. And that moves some souls. That moves some souls in the room. Apparently, a gentleman that worked there, a Black guy, and I'll keep him anonymous. And if he ever sees this, he'll know exactly who he is, and 1,000 thank yous to him. After that interview, he called me personally and he said, one, I want to tell you that this phone call never happened. And we all know what that means. Whatever was said between us at that point in time need not to be repeated. So I will paraphrase. He wanted me to make sure that I followed up the professional way you're supposed to follow up after any interview, to ensure that I put that, that final little seal on everything else that I achieved, that I did. He was like, you rock some people with that. It got notoriety from the CEO of Grand Circuits at the time. So I ended up getting that. Needless to say, I got the scholarship. And once I got it, that was all systems go. That I knew at that point in time, I didn't have to worry about finance. And the only thing I had to worry about was learning how to code.
You had your movie picture moment where you made the whole audience cry and stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
You got the miracle call. Okay, we want you. Here's the scholarship. Cool. Now you're starting the boot camp. What was the hardest parts in the beginning, middle, and end of the boot camp?
Oh man, in the beginning of the boot camp, you don't know your computer until you know how to code. Just having to, like get started with coding means you have to install a lot of stuff like IDEs, you have to JVMs, you know, you got virtual machines, you got a language, you got websites that you have to log into. And I had a MacBook. I didn't have a PC.
Yeah.
And for people that don't understand, MacBook is very, very not customizable software wise.
To say the least, yes.
Yeah, MacBooks, you need like a plug-in for almost everything if you're going to learn how to code. It was just being the overwhelming amount of information. I was being water hosed with information. And I got overwhelmed with processing it. I'm always a little anxious when I start something new because I always have a huge fear of failure because you see people fail at stuff and you're like, oh crap, like, and they never recover. And you're like, oh crap, I don't want that to be me. And so my anxiety took over in the beginning. So I got overwhelmed. It was tough processing all of the information. So I almost started to shut down a little bit. In the middle, after facing the shutdowns and starting to take the problems head on and starting to get the hang of it, like around week 3, or maybe like I would say probably about week 5 or 6, honestly. At that point, it was time management. Because at that point, we were learning the theory of code from like 9 a.m. to noon. You go to lunch, and then after lunch, you're actually coding. So, if you didn't fully understand the lesson that day, you were probably going back right after lunch, going through the lesson when you were supposed to be coding. Me, I wouldn't understand stuff from 2 days ago. So now I'm going back to stuff 2 days ago. I'm missing the day in between. I haven't coded stuff. So it was very patchy for me in the middle of it. And I'm like, man, I gotta get this together because no matter how much you read until you start punching those keys, you're not gonna progress forward. You can't theory write code. I mean, you can, but trust me, any developer can tell the difference between somebody that has never written code but theorized it and went through 4 years of college for it versus somebody that's actually sat down and wrote code and had to deploy it and stuff like that. You can tell the difference. It's not a it's not hard to see. So for me at that point in time, I was really learning how to just understand what bare essentials I needed from what we learned in the morning. Like just take the bare principles. And then in the afternoon, you gotta just apply it. And it was the repetition that started to get annoying because if you ran into one problem, it's more than one way to solve a problem with coding. So I would hop from not solving a problem to going to find another solution in the early stages, which is early stages of coding. Like you might see a problem, be like, and then you'll go to Stack Overflow, and you'd be like, this person is smarter than me. They got a better solution. I'm going to use this. That's where I was at the middle. At the end, I dealt with imposter syndrome. So towards the end of the boot camp, you kind of you take the pedal off of learning theory in the morning, and you're starting to try to build a portfolio. Learning how to curate your resume, learning how to network, talking to people. They were bringing graduates back that worked at different companies within the area. They would bring them back and have them talk to us in the morning and answer questions for us. So my imposter syndrome started to kick in because in retail, I never had to rely on a network. It was always, yo, I have a sales history. And then in every interview, we would talk about how you sold in your past job and, oh, sell me something right now. So it was very upfront. Like I didn't have to go after any, I didn't have to talk to a certain person. That's how I made it all the way up to AT&T. It was just this track record of having sales and improving in sales and reflecting upon that. With this, I was brand new. There was no network. I didn't know any other sales people. I mean, any other tech people like that. Some of these people came equipped with networks coming into that boot camp. Some of them already graduated college. Some of them came to that boot camp because their job sent them there. And you found out this like in the boot camp that everybody doesn't start off at the same level. So, that anxiousness that I had in the beginning, that partially attributed to it. But it really fully formed an imposter syndrome later on, because I'm like, I came to this whole party with no gifts. I'm not dressed up. I thought we was just hanging out, and it's more so like, no, this is a professional black tie affair, and it's like, oh, I am underprepared and ill-equipped. So at the end of the boot camp, I didn't get a job like right out of the boot camp. It took some time. So that imposter syndrome hit hard for a while, even after the boot camp.
So let's touch on a few things that you just spoke about. First, in the beginning, how it was overwhelming, all the new like terminology and concepts. Do you have any tips for people who are watching on how to like help get over that problem, or any like things they could try to do?
Immersion. So one of the things that I've learned is immerse yourself. I found some really creative ways to do it. If you're unfamiliar with tech, start by watching tech shows like Silicon Valley. All of those shows where they talk about the daily life of people in tech. You'll start to hear the lingo in like normal conversations. That level, like that shallow level of immersion, no, it's not real, but they also have to speak to some level of realness in that show. Or you're gonna have a bunch of developers writing to Silicon Valley, like, hey, this is crap. None of this is factually true. So, like looking back, I realized that like immersing yourself into like the culture of tech, get exposed early on, talk to people, go on LinkedIn and, reach out to people for the boot camps, find graduates before you even take the boot camp, when you're thinking about taking that boot camp. You have to immerse yourself, because if you don't, you won't become adapted to it, because you are essentially changing yourself. Once you make this leap into tech like this, and you put like 40 hours a week in for 90 days, you change as a human being. Your brain changes. So you have to immerse yourself into that stuff, because if you try to do it alone, you will feel weird. You will notice all of the changes. Where if you immerse yourself and you have it in your everyday life, like you're watching YouTube videos about what are some of the things that you heard so far before you even take the boot camp. Like, what is a virtual machine? What is Java? Why does MacBook never have any of the customizations that you need to just code? Like looking into stuff like that. All of those questions go right into the search bar on Google, right into the search bar on YouTube. Start immersing yourself. That is the biggest piece of advice I can give in the beginning.
Now I was laughing because I just started watching Silicon Valley this year. I have a bunch
Really?
of coworkers always read like, yo, see Silicon Valley? And I'm like, it's an older show. But I finally watched it this year. I'm like, it feels good to have something I can actually relate to. Because you have all these rival shows that are about like drama and stuff like that, but it's nothing like techie or anything like that. So on a regular basis, once you leave your regular job, you exit that world.
Yeah, you kind of walk away from it. And when you're learning at this pace because you're kind of learning at an accelerated rate. So, for people that don't know, boot camps are supposed to be the equivalent of a 2-year associate's degree, crammed into 3 months. That's a lot of, stripping down stuff that you get in school. And the reason why school is so long is so you can immerse yourself slowly. Like how people will use the stairs to walk into a pool. That's a slow immersion. A boot camp is your cousin pushing you when you was trying to read the sign and see how deep the side was. You just got pushed into the deep end and it's a sink or swim thing kind of. But I don't want to say, because that instills some level of fear into people, like, oh, so I'm a drown in this. And it's like, no, it's just that you get hit with a lot of information and it's built upon very quickly. And you got to be able to absorb it and you have to immerse yourself in it at that point. So you might as well start with a good show so you can have something to laugh at, because it's going to be some trials and tribulations when you go through a boot camp.
And that's the thing, because I went the traditional university route, but even like that, I felt so lost because I played basketball in my college. So all my regular friends were basketball people. Then I did my coding classes, stuff like that. But outside of class, I had no one to relate to.
Right.
And then I'll have problems with my code. I'm like, I'm not friends with anybody in my class. Who can I even go to for help? So if you are like a boot camp, network with your friends in your classes, make connections, because they can help you go through a lot of things.
Oh yeah, way more things. I got a story for that one too. A little later, I know you're gonna ask that question.
And even then, because I even had classmates, even like in my regular job, they'd be like, "Oh yeah, I built a computer at like 8," and I'm like, "You did what?" It's like, "Yeah, I got all parts, I ordered it and put it together." I'm like, I didn't have my own personal laptop until my junior year of college. That's supposed to be
right.
Laptop to be in the physical room.
Yeah.
It was a big laptop, a big bulky laptop. Before that, I was just in a computer lab. School.
That 15-pound boy when 15-pound laptops wasn't cool. Yeah, I know.
And it had a loud fan, so I had to sit in the back so I don't get hit my fan and complain about it. It was just terrible.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, you still experience that in a boot camp. Like, usually when you develop friendships in school is based on other interests, and then you guys kind of go down similar pathways because based on interest. When you break away from your friend's interest and you're like, oh, well, I want to do this, especially with technology being relatively new to society, period. Like, this is new. I'm not going to say we're the first generation. We're like the second or third generation, which means like that first generation were the elite of the elite of the elite, the ones that, were math wizards, and they built the foundation. And you had the second generation of people that were like, okay, we can build upon all of these math wizard stuff by adding functions and extensions and stuff. And we're the generation that wears hoodies and hats, and we're like, we've been playing with computers since we were like 14. We don't know all of the deep functions, but all of that cool stuff that you want to see on the screen, we know how to make that go. Yeah. We know how to navigate the internet, not just the computer. We know how to navigate the internet. So now we're on like a fourth generation where we do business through the internet, high level amounts of business, where we're on the edge of the fifth generation, where now the internet controls our currency. So the stuff that we were immersed into when we were kids, stuff that we played with, is what we're picking up as a profession now. But now you're seeing the dysphoria between an inner city kid that, was on Facebook when you had to get an email invite and tagged in Black Planet, versus the kids that built the computers, that are now like, oh yeah, I built computers, so now I know all of the hardware parts, and I know how the motherboard works, and I know all this other stuff. Now I'm just learning the code part of it so I can be more well-rounded. And it's like, wow, I just stepped into this. So you see different levels and it gets scary. It gets real scary because some of these people, you're like, how did you not go to MIT on a full scholarship?
Exactly. Like going back to imposter syndrome, like because when I was a kid, I played sports and stuff. Like
Right.
that was my fun. Their fun was, hey, I'm gonna read this book on computers. I'm like, so they had a head start in the field, but that just motivated me to work extra hard to catch up to where they were. So I want to be in the
Absolutely.
same room as them and speak comfortably. So at first it can be very
Yeah.
intimidating. And like, I don't want to sound stupid, but once you have that confidence, it's a different story.
Yeah.
And that's the other part where a lot of companies, you'll see someone that's very smart, but they can't switch to the team because they just feel like they're above people. And that's why even when hiring managers are deciding, hey, should I take this really smart person, but he's not a team player, or this person that is a little lower education wise, but works well as a team, let's go with the other person because the team will build around him instead of that person dragging the team down and being cancerous. So that's another tip for you guys.
Yeah. That man, highlight it. Make it a clip, make it a short, put it out because that is hyper important.
Because honestly speaking, I know there's been job interviews where I was able to talk myself into the job because they felt the charisma, the personality, like, oh, he's just not a person who's just going to code away. He has actually, he can communicate properly to other people. And that's
Yeah.
important in the real world.
And the adaptability that you have when you're new is valuable. Never short sell yourself because the eagerness to learn means that you're willing to learn just about anything. And these companies don't all work the same way with technology. They all don't use the same methodologies. They don't all follow the same practices. They all don't use the same products and services to make their technology work. So they want you to learn their specific way if they have a specific way. So new people are great because you're new to the company. You're going to learn everything about the company as you're learning their technology. You're a great value. It's like getting a rookie. It's like getting a rookie that wants to be on your team. He's like, I wanted to be on this team since I was a kid. And he's actually good. And he's actually good. And it's like, oh crap, he's gonna learn basketball here for like the next 10 years. He doesn't want to go anywhere. We don't have to worry about the money. He'll take pay cuts. He just want to play for this team. And that's valuable. People love when they can build with you because not only are you malleable to what they have going on, as you learn, you help establish rules and processes. So 2 years from now, you started off as an associate, but through 2 years from now, you might be a senior because you worked there for 2 years. Imagine all of the domain knowledge that you take, especially for people that want to take boot camps. You learn how to code in 3 months. Imagine what you can learn in 2 years. Companies companies look at that.
Yeah, that's the difference between like traditional university and boot camps, where boot camps are teaching you a skill for the job. With universities, I felt a lot of times where you memorize something for the test and then that's it.
Yeah,
You're good at skills for the test.
you have to cover what's ever in the books that they have to buy from the professors that they have to sell to you. So when that professor puts those two paragraphs in a book that you bought 2 years ago, but now it's a brand new version, that has to be covered on the test so they can validate the reason for you to spend $850 on that new version of that book. I know this is probably not gonna make the part,
No, but
but
it's the
that's the
honest
honest
truth.
truth. Yeah, it's the truth.
And then because
It's just
they both have
go
their
ahead.
pros and cons. That's the whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely. They both have their pros and cons. I would like to say it's like building a car. So when you're in the boot camp, it's like when you get that first car, if you have a mechanic dad, he's like, I'm not gonna give you a working car. You're gonna make the car work.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not gonna get a working piece of, you're not gonna get something that's working, but with you building it and your eagerness to make it work, you're going to have the skills that's going to make you way more valuable to repairing your car versus somebody that has a nice little decent job, or their parents are loaded and they're like, oh, we're just going to go to the lot and pick you out a car. Okay, you both, now when you both get on the road, people both see drivers. You're both driving cars and it's great. But this person might have a little more assistance because they can take their car back to the lot. But you have more intuition and know-how and know how to troubleshoot your own problems because you're the one that's fixing your own car. Does it take more of your time and money? Absolutely. But you learned all of the basics to do it yourself versus somebody that can go back to the dealership and pay somebody. Or they have a network now that they can not just take it to that dealership, they can take it to the chain of dealerships. You know, that's how I look at it when you compare it. Boot camps are like, yo, I learned how to build cars from the ground up, you know, at a younger age or whatever age, versus somebody that's like, oh, I only lease vehicles. I know how to get in it and get out of it and tell you when it's broke, but I don't know too much past that. It gets done and it's taken care of, but it's functioning and working.
And the whole thing is honestly getting your foot in the door. Because once you have your foot in the door,
nothing matters.
The next job won't care where you got your education from, just can you do the job or not?
Yeah, and that's it. Once you're in the company, can you do the job or not? And it doesn't even necessarily mean can you do the job. Some people in tech are very social and networking, and they play very political roles. So that's another topic for another interview. Essentially, when you get into these jobs, like I said before, the company has a certain way they want to do stuff. Your degree is now just a tool to show it. It was a tool to get you in the door to say, hey, I've spent 4 years of my life, you know, dedicating myself to the theory and practice of this. And it's like, okay, they're taking that as proof of purchase of your matriculation into that level of training. The boot camp is, yo, I had 3 months and a good amount of money and I slammed my head against it, but I'm here. And it's like, you know what? You went through those 3 months and you got a working website and you showed it to me. Hey, it's the same thing. You showed me working code. I can't deny that.
Yeah.
So now you both got your foot in the door. Now the pedal is to the floor, and this is why boot camps became popular. Boot camps show you something that you don't kind of go through in universities. Is deploying a website from the code base to the internet. Like all in a short amount of time. Like usually when I talk to people that got degrees, they said that they did it in bits and pieces, and like in their final year they built a website, and it was a very, very, very basic website where a lot of people for their final projects for boot camps were ideas that they had, and some people sold to other companies like, oh, well, I saw that this company didn't take this idea, had this problem, so I came up with a website solution for it. Implementing like IBM, Watson, and stuff like that, API protocols, like heavy level stuff that you normally wouldn't see in a senior level project from somebody graduating from the university. Because it's only when you're graduating from the university, you're presenting your project to a teacher. We all know how that goes. You're gonna make it good enough. There are very few that's gonna make it like out of this world. Most people are just trying to get the grade. In the boot camp, when you build that final project, it's so you can get your first job. That's money on the line. So you have to put your best foot forward. It's a real sink or swim situation. So between those two, once you get there, you got to be able to follow the process from implementation all the way to, we see it on the customer facing website and it's working. You got to be comfortable going through that whole process. that whole software development life cycle. Yeah.
So talk about the struggles of the boot camp. What was your favorite part of the boot camp? Let's be positive for a little.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think this is it'll probably segue into another part. Building friendships. Everybody in that boot camp is going through the same thing that you're going through. They don't, even though people come from different backgrounds, everybody is in that boot camp to get something. They may know how to code, but they may have never deployed a website. They may have taken some classes on code years ago and they understand the basics, but they don't understand these newer languages that companies are using, like Python. So we're all there to learn. And you're spending 8 hours a day, 5 days a week with these people. So you might as well start talking, making friends. You're going to learn, you're going to collaborate. So in that situation, I made one of my closest friends in the boot camp. He was the guy that actually helped me get my first job out of boot camp where he was working. It was really just being able to hang out with people, going back to that immersion thing. You're in the class with people that are they might be a little more immersed than you, but it's not too far gone where you're like, I have no idea what this person is talking about. So you'll find people you'll find people in different parts of the shallow end of learning how to code in an immersion pool, if you want to make coding an immersion pool, like metaphor. We're all in the shallow end. Some might be in 3 feet, some might be in 1 feet, some might be just getting their toes in, but we're all kind of in that same general area. So you get to learn from each other and it's fun. A lot of them have cool amenities. We're out of the pandemic. I don't know what it was like in the pandemic. I went to a boot camp outside of one. So being able to wake up in the morning, grab coffee, hang out with people and learn people as you're learning code and you're sharing stuff. It was a great time. So I still talk to a couple of people outside of the boot camp, and it's 6 years later.
So that's another thing. Network, especially in boot camps, because you guys basically have the same core skill set from the boot camp. So if one of them get hired, and that company's hiring more people, they can connect you. That's an easy connection.
Absolutely. That's how I got my first job. My friend got hired, and then he heard that they were doing another round of hiring like 6 months later. And as soon as they started that next round of hiring, I got in.
But that means you still have to do your part where that person trusts to refer you, because if you're just slacking off, they're gonna be like, I'm putting my name on the line to refer you, then it's not worth it. So if you are taking that next step, go all in.
Yeah, your work with faith without work is fruitless. So trust me, you have to do the work. Luckily, I was on my midterm project with this guy and my final project with this guy. So he knew that I would do the work. So he was like, I have no problem vouching for you. I've seen you work. We stayed after the boot camp. You will stay after the boot camp. Boot camp is 9 to 5 normally. That is the office hours for the teachers. The hours for you are something like 8 o'clock to 10:30, maybe sometimes, maybe 11. I've walked out of there at midnight one time. You never know. But you will stay after a boot camp, because whatever you learned, you're not going to fully 100% understand that day. So it's a process.
And that's the thing with the learning process. You might hear it from one time from one person and be like, I don't get it. Then you hear it 2 or 3 more times from different perspectives, like, oh, now it's starting to click for me because they phrase it different.
Yeah. Ubiquitous lane. That is the biggest thing about tech. It's like 4 or 5 terms for like almost everything.
Yeah.
It's nicknames that become common language, the actual definition. If you work at a company, they might call it something totally different in that company. You never know. So yeah, you gotta stay on it.
Quick pause. I hope you're enjoying the video so far. If so, don't forget to like it. And more importantly, subscribe to my email list on my website. I will have a manual QA as well as an automation QA course coming out before the year is out. And by subscribing, which is free, You'll get notified first when it's coming out. Now back to the video. So you said you got the job through your other through your other person in the camp, but do you feel like the camp prepared you skill-wise for that job?
So this is where stepping into quality after learning how to code is kind of weird. So I never knew what quality was. I never knew what testing was. I just assumed that before I knew tech, developers wrote something and then you just deployed it. So that's hilarious to me now. I ended up getting a job as a manual tester. So these websites that are deployed that we go to every day, that's the customer facing website. That's that is the that's the show that is put on from whatever company you're working for. There's a behind the scenes for every website that you see. There is databases working, APIs being called. It is a whole working machine to get some of those websites that we love, like Facebook and stuff, up. But not to think just in the social aspect, you got to think about how some of these prominent companies, like you can sign up for car insurance on a website now. Progressive, you can buy a car. You can go look at cars at Chrysler, GM, Ford, Fiat, whatever. You can buy stuff online. All of that stuff has to work the same way that it works in the real world. So yeah, you can't just look at a developer and be like, you're responsible for all of this. You will destroy somebody's brain and soul if you did that. So one of the things that you learn in tech is that all of these jobs are spread out. It's not just the developer doing this work. You have developers, you have testers, you have DevOps, you have quality engineers, you have architects and all of these other people. They know code, they know how tech works, and they know how websites work. But I walked in like, hey, I know Java. And it's like, and it's like, yeah, that's great, but how do you know how to use Java? And I'm like, for loops. Yeah, man. So, I'm talking about basic principles, and they're like, yeah, the principles are great, but we need you to be able to test our APIs. And I'm like, test the what now? And they're like, okay, we're not even going to start you there. Follow these steps that were written out and make sure all of this stuff exists on the website. I'm like, okay, that sounds easy. And that's how I started my journey in equality. I'm like, oh wait, so you have to test this stuff and make sure that it works. And it's like, yeah. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's cool. I'm like, okay, so how deep do we test? So the manual testing job led me to becoming actual quality consultant for a startup, because I was only testing the UI. So I was writing test cases. And at the first job, like the first 6 months, I was a manual tester. And then I'm like, yo, I know how to code. I know how to code. And they were like, okay, well, we're starting an experimental automation team, because they vendored testing out to other companies. Mm-hmm. So they were starting to do experimental automation. So I joined that team. I was really just doing scrum work for them, like making sure that the meetings and everything, the work was tracked. And I would help implement some stuff in scripting, but it wasn't really that deep. You can only go so deep when you only have this much access being a vendor. So I became a quality consultant for a startup so I can see deeper. And it was a short contract, but I ended up really understanding, like, testing starts at the moment that quality starts at the moment that you conceive the idea that you want to do something. And I'm like, oh, okay. So how deep does this go? after that contract ended with the startup, I landed where I am now, and that was 3 years ago. And it's a fintech company. It's they work with mortgages. It's a large company. It's a large industry, and they have their own loan origination system. So a lot of stuff is custom built. So now when I'm like in the matrix of it all, where I can see I'm following stack trace calls. Um, Today I logged my first, and trust me, as somebody that just I found my own production bug. Like nobody else caught this bug, and I'm considered new to some degree there. So for me, logging my first production level bug today was like some level of accomplishment. Like, yo, I confirmed this bug. I saw this bug in this huge system, and I'm like, yo, what's that right there? So the progression and the growth in learning quality, like up until this job now, I was never certified in quality. Now I am. I'm a certified software tester. So the journey has been great, and I can't wait to see where it takes me next. Like I think I want to be a validation engineer after this. Like get some real put some real code on the line and see if it works. Like stuff that works interact with hardware on a deeper level.
So overall, how you felt like the job market has been for you since you first came out to till now?
How do I feel the job market has been?
For you,
The
yeah.
job market.
Yeah, like going on interviews, that whole process.
Interviews are interesting. So one of the most important things that I would like to say is that whatever skills that you have are only preliminary in the interview. Research that company because it's only going to speak better to who you are as a person in tech, really, because tech is a lot of research and documentation. And people fail to realize that. So the more you show you like to do research, the better you come off, because that means you're willing to be well read about what you're speaking to and what you have going on. So researching companies is important. Knowing what languages they use, what IDE they have, what methodologies they prefer are important. So yeah, you can know how to code, but going back to when I walked into my first job and I'm like, I know Java. It was kind of useless to Chrysler at that the vendor. It wasn't Chrysler at that point in time. That was a different project. It was useless to the vendor because the vendor was working in C#. So even though for tech people that do know, they share some similarities, those are two different languages. The architecture that I knew from the coding bootcamp was elementary level architecture. This is enterprise level architecture over here. You have to be able to speak to some of that stuff, and that's being able to research and talk to people that worked there and are currently working there and gather information. Because when you go into these interviews, they are going to test your knowledge, not just about what you know about coding, but they are going to test you on what you know about the company. Because anybody can come in talking about code and look at a YouTube video an hour before and be like, for loops and, if statements. And they're like, oh, you know how to code. But being able to speak to, hey, I know that you guys use C#. I know Java, but I know that they're both object-oriented programming languages. So I won't be 100% behind the ball while learning C#. I still know object-oriented programming, but me knowing Java will help me learn C# to be better for the company. Knowing the IDEs that the company use, because you're going to troubleshoot in that IDE. Oh, you guys use, let's say, Visual Studio. Oh, I didn't use I used Visual Studio in my bootcamp. So I know the IDE. I know exactly what's going on. I won't be unfamiliar with it. So I can so it'll take less time to train me up and ramp me up so I can be of a contribution to the team. Things like that.
I had a funny story about researching companies. So I was at a point, this is when I was applying for my consulting firm. But at the time, I was applying for a bunch of jobs, going on interviews all the time and stuff. Now I have like these tech interviews, these code interviews, be easy. I get this one particular one. They say, here's this booklet, fill it out, do all the coding problems, and we'll be back in 10 minutes. I'm breezing through. Then the last question is, what does their acronym stand for their company name? And I'm like, oh, snap. And I have no idea.
Because you so focused on, I got to be able to go, I got to know these code problems.
And I'm looking around for like any signs or anything. I'm like, damn, I'm about to fail this because I don't know the company name. Then on the bottom says copyright, this, and that. And I'm like, oh, snap. That was my saving grace. Now I actually got hired for that job, but I'm like, I was so caught up in just doing interviews and not researching the companies itself, almost blew a job.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, those companies know, especially coming out of a boot camp, you're looking for a job. You're looking for that, what people market on the internet. Oh, your first tech job would be like 60K. You can make six figures in tech. And people are like shooting for a job where they're like, oh, I did some research on this position and I know they make about a medium of 70 to 75K, even though that's probably not going to be the offer that you get. That's another
video also. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a whole nother topic. So, going in there, a lot of people have a mercenary mindset. They treat it like, and anybody that's ever watched an action movie, you get the rookie. The rookie is like, oh yeah, I learned all of this stuff in training, and then you got the experienced person is like, congratulations on the training wheels, taking the training wheels off. None of that means anything. And it's like, wait, what? And that's what it kind of goes to. You can't just come in there with the tool set alone. Like, that's anybody can show up to a construction site with a tool belt. Just because you have all of those tools doesn't mean you know what you're doing. And those people want to know, yeah, you have that tool set, but can you speak to it? How can you tell us how you can utilize this tool set that you have to be of value to the company, way past the tool set? Because yes, you can write a for loop, but what you find out is that it's not a lot to learn how to do a for loop, especially with the pace that the world is changing, because the world is still moving forward as these years add on. So 1 year out of a boot camp, they might not even be teaching the same language that you learned in the boot camp. Because due to the market trends, like in a job market, 5 years ago, Java was important. They haven't taught Java in like 3 years. And I'm like, oh, whoa, what happened to Java? And I think back to when I first came out of the boot camp. I'm saying Java so much that you thought I was talking about coffee. Like, Java this, Java that, Java this, Java this, Java that, Java this. And I'm like, but now if people ask me about Java, I'm like, yeah, I know it. And if you ask me to code into it, you're gonna have to give me a little bit, but it'll come back to me. But if you really want, like, now I had to learn Python, the basis of Python.
Everyone has
Python. I had to move from Python to C#. And I'm like, oh, because the startup did Python. Corporate uses C#. And you'll find out the reason why all of these places use these different languages. They have its reasoning for it. So yeah, even then, the one language that you learned in a boot camp may not be relevant. So you got to be able to take that toolkit and evolve it, build something from it. You got to take that construction belt and turn it into the utility belt that Batman has and be able to use it. It's crucial.
And you already dropped a few gems and tips about the whole QA experience. Do you have any more tips for boot camps and then QA as a whole for people in their journey?
Boot camps. Once you leave that boot camp, you do not stop working on projects. You do not stop developing your portfolio, and you do not stop diversifying your portfolio. That was one of the biggest regrets that I had coming out of the boot camp, is that I left myself financially exposed a little bit, because I ran into the boot camp. So like, once I found out that I got that scholarship, like I got the phone call at work, I took my lunch and typed up my 2-week notice. You know, I'm like, because I wasn't happy in retail sales, and the particular team I was working with at that time was very frustrating. So I'm like, oh, you know, just like how I said it was a movie moment. Like I got that phone call, I almost like broke down on the floor, like on the sales floor. I'm like, what? And now I'm like, oh crap. Next thing you know, like I go on lunch, I go out into my car, elated. Next thing you know, my brain was like, quit right now. And I'm like, oh, okay. I didn't have like a full long-term plan, like post boot camp and all of that stuff. I kind of got a scholarship. I got the scholarship like 1 month before the boot camp started. So it went from, oh yeah, I'm gonna be working and I got money and I'm paying bills, to I'm not about to be paying bills for the next 90 days minimum. I have no cash flow coming in. So after I graduated my boot camp, I was like in the hole. So I immediately ran back to work. And it got the bills paid, but I let my skills lack in that time. So I didn't get my first tech job until 6 months after my boot camp. And I will attribute part of that. My accountability and my responsibility is that I wasn't working on my portfolio in my off time. Like I went right back to the grind of working. You know, I took manager roles at sales places. So now I'm working hours, like 50 hours. I'm not going to look at code after I was doing that. Like my brain, I was burnt. So you have to keep that portfolio after boot camp. It's imperative. It's important.
On that real quick, a lot of people think that, oh, I'm gonna graduate this boot camp and then tomorrow I'm gonna have a job waiting.
No. Mm-mm. Mm-mm. You still got to interview with every other person that is coming out of, and now it's different. And I want to point this out. Not only are you competing with the people that come out of other boot camps, because you want to have some level of camaraderie with the people that go through the boot camp that you're going through. Never try to make them competition, because this is competition that I'm about to describe. When you hit this job market, you have to compete not only with the people from boot camps that you like, past boot camps from the one that you graduated from. You have to compete with people that graduated from other boot camps that have no affiliation with the boot camp that you went to. You have to compete with people that have graduated from community college, people that have graduated from universities. And then you have the naturally gifted people that pick this up just off the strength of they like it and they had an interest in it. And they all have something to bring. So now what they say that a third of the workforce is going to be in tech by 2050. Don't quote me on that 100%, but a third of America's workforce will be working in tech by 2050. That's a lot of people. And that doesn't mean that everybody in them, that's not a third of America. Like, you know, not every American, people are going to be fighting and competing for these jobs. So you have to stay on top of this stuff. You got to be on it, because you have to be able to separate yourself from the pack. and you have to be able to speak to how you separated yourself from the pack.
And it's even harder now because some jobs are more open to remote work. So you're not even competing with people in your area anymore. You're competing with people
All
in
over
the
the
US
world.
and in the world basically now, where we can just outsource this for cheaper.
And that happens a lot. But for the quality part, and this will go back to what I said for separating yourself from the pack. Quality isn't taught in boot camps. Quality isn't taught in colleges. Quality is something that you walk into when you get into corporate. Nobody talks about quality in school. Quality is something that you learn in corporate because you're not concerned about quality when you're learning. You're only concerned about quality when you're producing. So when these companies have money on the line, they're concerned about, hey, nothing goes down, right? Anything that we deploy is not going to break our systems, right? So for quality, going back to separating yourself from the pack, I heavily, heavily recommend being certified because, like I said before, every company has a different way of doing things for their technology. Every tech company moves a little different. And you got to recognize that every industry has tech behind it. So the mortgage industry has tech behind it. The insurance industry has tech behind it. Healthcare has tech behind it. All tech from healthcare doesn't work the same way that tech from mortgage does. So when you become certified in software testing, you're learning the overall principles of quality testing, not based off of what your company said, not based off of, trends that they see in the future, not based off what you learned in school. It's based off of the community of quality people that worked in all of these industries over a multitude of decades now at this point. And they all came together and said, hey, we need some level of standardization on how we should do this stuff. What are the basic principles that you can take across all of this? What are some of the testing techniques that are present across all of this? So becoming certified does two things. One, it gives you an esoteric look at what quality is from a system standpoint and a coding standpoint. And two, it shows your tenacity to be a better quality tester because becoming certified is not required from anybody. Nobody requires anybody to become certified. I mean, jobs can ask for it, like if you're in the role, but becoming certified shows that you're taking your own time, energy, and money and resources to understand the industry level standards of what quality testing is. So I got qualified. I got certified. I got certified about 6 months ago. Since my certification, what I've done at my company is that I've started a study group to have other quality testers become certified with the assistance of the quality coaches that we have at our company. And I've helped them curate a training program that I've helped them build upon their training program that they have, where they take people that work in production, their mortgage production, and they bring them over and make them quality testers and business analysts. So I'm helping bolster training programs. I'm helping, I'm helping set quality standards at my job, as well as, like I said earlier, I found my first production bug. So I want my credit for that because look, that's I went to my VP and he was like, oh, this is exactly what I was expecting you to. I knew you were gonna find something. I knew you were gonna dig this up. And I was like, for him to have that faith in me to parse through these emails after he gave me clear direction. And I came back with, he was like, I knew something was going on. I just didn't know what. And it's like, well, I found it for you. And he's like, thank you. And it's an unrivaled feeling because again, I'm the kid with no degree. I'm the guy at work with no degree. So for me to be able to do all of that on my own, confirm and confirm bugs in production and be able to speak to VPs that have been working in this industry for years, and they're like, I knew I can expect good things from you when I task you to do this. It's something that it gives me a feeling of pride that you can't take away from me at all.
You mentioned it a few times. What boot camp did you actually go to? What was the full name of it?
Again, the name is Grand Circus. It's located in downtown Detroit. I'll send a link to you. I know you could probably drop it in the community tab or somewhere on a video when you release it.
I'll drop it in the description box. You guys can just look at that. Remember, do your own research though before going to any boot camp. I don't want you guys blaming either of us because you did the boot camp and it didn't work out for you. Do your own due diligence, your own research. It's your money you're investing.
Yes, absolutely. And since I'm giving out websites, because I was the guy that commented about being certified in one of your comments previously. That's how we ended up doing this. A lot of people did ask, how did I get certified? What was the website? So the website is istqb.org. Once you go to the website, it'll tell you the steps that you have to do to get certified and where you would have to go to test and things like that. And it'll give you all the information you need to know.
I'll leave the link in the description box for that also. I'll put it on the screen also. And if they want to contact you for any questions or any tips, can I get your email or anything like that?
I don't exactly have a business one yet, but I do have a bunch of emails. If you grew up in the early 2000s, you got like 9 of them. I do have one that I do get a lot of people sending questions to because I do have people from the boot camp reach back out to me. It is Scott, SCOTT, the number 1, VT@gmail.com. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Also, my mentor has told me if anybody needs coaching sessions, I'm open to 30-minute coaching sessions. I know a lot of people have a lot of questions and they have a lot of, they need direction and guidance. So a great guy that I follow, you know who I'm talking about, Anton Daniels, that's Big Bro. He gave me the idea that you got to start giving back to the people. I'm not looking for anything. I'm just looking to bolster myself and start pointing people in the right direction. I won't say that I got all of the time in the world. I am a father of a soon-to-be 1-year-old, and I do have a lot of work, and I do a lot of stuff like this, interviews and things like this on the side. But I will find time. I will schedule time for people to do 30-minute coaching calls so I can point you in the right direction if you need advice about boot camps, if you need advice about getting into testing. I want to be that point, that source and point, and be able to help people.
And this is why I bring people like this onto my channel, so you're not just getting my perspective. Because I may have a limited point of view, but the more point of views you get, the more information you get, the more you have to work with.
Absolutely. And even last time when we talked, I think we tied your because you're a referee, right?
Yes.
We made that great analogy, and this is something that I want to leave everybody with, because this goes back to the immersion point. The testing lead is a referee for basketball in his free time, and we made the analogy, the correlation between what it's like being a referee and what it's like being in quality. And I think the best thing about that is that if you want to understand how we got to that point, is that in order to do quality for these companies, you have to know a lot about software. You have to know a lot about coding and the processes and stuff. And specifically, when you're on those teams, you are like a referee. You have to know how that code is working on a technical level, and also how it's working on a website, because you're the person that mitigates between getting that code from just being on somebody's local machine to being in production. So you have to referee that entire migration from code base to website. So it's sometimes you're gonna have to say flag on the play, times out. That that's not hitting the right API endpoint. We gotta roll back to dev. Or you might get all the way to stage and you might have to say, yo, pause. It's not integrating right. We gotta roll all the way back to that person's local machine. As a quality tester, as a quality assurance analyst, as a quality assurance engineer, you are that referee where you're calling every play. You have to see every play that goes on with that software that you're responsible for at that time, because people are going to come to you, just like you see everybody come to those referees on those crucial calls in all of our favorite games. And I know they done came to you before. I know you done been in those situations where you had to make some real tough calls where you was about to get booed, or somebody's parents was about to be like, you did my baby wrong. But that's what it's like being in quality. Like, you can see your developers working hard and you can see them, they put in a lot of work, and you hate to be the guy to be like, yo, it's not working though.
Yeah.
We got to roll it back and you guys got to fix it. Or they might have tried to fix something 5 times and they look visibly frustrated. You got to be the guy to be like, lucky number 6. But you got to, it's a mindset. So if you ever want to liken if you want to attribute what it's like being in quality, go look at all of those referees in every sport that you like, that you have an interest in. 2 things about that referee right off the bat. One, they have to have an in-depth knowledge of the sport. That means that they have to know everything that's going on in that court. And then they have to have an in-depth knowledge of the rules, which is different than having an in-depth knowledge of the sport. Combine those 2, and now you can see how 2 teams play something out perfectly. In quality, you have to have a deep knowledge of code, and you have to have a deep knowledge of quality and understand how to achieve the best quality in order to see a project go from code base to production, to being fully stood up. And it doesn't have to be something that's website facing. It can be something on the back end, standing up a new framework, put it in a new API layer, vendor integration points, things like that. Seeing that stuff go from just being talked about in documentation to being, oh, yo, it's functioning, and now we've relieved X amount of cost to our main database. So now we have, now we're using less server space. Now we're not hitting that server so much. So we're saving money overall. That's the type of stuff you have to think about in quality. Like, yeah, I see it right now, but where does it go in the whole scheme of things? And how do I make sure it safely plays out all the way up into that point? So, I mean, for you to be in quality and for you to be a referee, you really are living. You are about this life, sir.
It's about providing the best product for the end users at the end of the day. With refereeing, the best product that sport. With quality, the best product for our customers.
Same thing. Got to be the same thing. And that's just one of those things. So in coaching calls, super important, and this is the same as plug. Correlating your current skills to the skills that you aspire to is something that's really important. Because whatever you got now, and I think that's one of the things that you'll learn for people taking boot camps, whatever soft skills you have now, transfer over in ways that you don't even know. I am a competitive fighting game player. So I've played fighting games on tournament circuits across the United States for a decade now.
Wow.
I used that to get my first job. As a manual tester, I kid you not. And the way I did it is when they asked, why do I think I will be a good fit for for this job as a manual tester. I said, as a tester, you have to test all of the various different ways something works and how it doesn't work. As a competitive fighting game player, I've had to learn and master my character, not just all of his move sets, but how it interacts with every other character. Because when I compete, I not only have to know my move set, I have to know my opponent's move set as well. Because if I'm not privy to their move set, then that means that I'm at a disadvantage. So I've dedicated hours and days of my life to perfect not only me using my character, but knowing the move set and timing and frame data of other characters so I can better compete against them. So now I know more than one different. I know more than one way to win against any given character. Isn't that similar to writing test cases? Isn't that similar to going through test strategy and going through test scenarios? Blew them away. Got the first job. But that is a perfect example of how you have to take hobbies. The test lead is a referee. I play fighting games. Our interests still correlate to our careers. I was in sales before, troubleshooting things. That was a soft skill I learned in retail. It's here. But also, another important thing for all of my people in retail, customer service transfers. Because you're always gonna have a client. Somebody needs that software. Somebody wants that software work. That's your customer. That's your client.
Perfect. This is why you need your YouTube channel. I'm trying to push you. you
Man, look,
the certifications in the beginning. You can build on that.
Yeah, Anton, he said it nicely, like he was talking to the group. But I knew when he said what he said, I was like, oh, yeah, that was everybody. But somebody in this room need to definitely hear this for real. Okay, for real. So, yeah, it's happening. I got a kid that's about to turn 1 in like 30 days.
Congrats on that, first off.
Thank you. So, like, it's just been a hectic first year, but trust me, it's coming. With things like this, it's just nothing but motivation to get out there more. Like I said, I'm on his channel. I've been over here. I've been on Bernard Riley's channel before. So I have a foundation to get out there. Like, oh, people have seen me places, so people know who I am. So once I throw my channel up, aggregating people won't be a problem.
Yeah, and as you said, like, people asking you questions. Once you have a platform, it's magnified. Like, I feel bad now because I have comments that I'm weeks behind in. I have emails that I'm behind in. And that's why I stopped getting on my social media on my regular channel, because I was getting DMs. I'm like, damn, I don't have time to answer all of these. But if you have more people to go to, you can help me out.
Yeah, and that's what I started looking at it like. I'm like, yo, because after trying to schedule this, I'm like, he got a busy schedule. He going to school, refereeing. I'm a dad. I'm like, wait. I'm like, hey, yo, he overwhelmed. Because I'm answering questions. I started answering the questions in the comments. And I'm like, yo, let me get to these questions because I don't want you to think that I'm like, I just showed them like, haha, I have flexed on you all. And I'm just going to walk away. It's just like, people, get into this. Because another thing is like, if you can build an army of QA people, that's building your own QA consultancy firm. You got people that followed you from YouTube, and it's like, yo, calling all my QAs, it's finally time. I'm about to start my own firm. I need, for all of those people that's been following me for years or whatever, now it's time to work with me.
Yeah.
So yeah, I found a whole little plan for it. I'm
gonna try to set up a community, like a Discord or something eventually, whether it's free or it's like $1 to get the bots out of there. I'll figure it out, but there's just so many avenues with this. So once again, I want to thank you for taking time out of your day, being on the channel, giving your feedback on your experiences. Any closing remarks for you?
I always like to tell people, At this point in time, coding is the digital construction of our physical world. And as we continue to evolve, as we change policies, as we progress as a human species, as you know, capitalists, as business people, our technology constantly needs to be a reflection of that. It's gonna be a reflection of what we do. So it's always gonna be jobs in tech. More specifically, it's always gonna be jobs in quality. We gotta test this stuff. Join us in this journey and making sure that we deliver quality technology to not just clients, but to people overall.
Thanks again. So have a good night, and thanks for everything.
It's been a great time. I appreciate it, Test Lead. It's been great. I can't wait to do this again. It's been dope.